Symbolism and Art Nouveau were international art movements that flourished in the final decades of the 19th century. Symbolism sought to restore the role of imagination and ideas in the arts, while Art Nouveau fulfilled a more decorative function. Origins and influences. Symbolism emerged as a reaction against the naturalist movements, Realism, see page 324, and Impressionism, see page 340, which had dominated the progressive art scene after the 1850s. By concentrating only on what the artist saw, naturalists had largely ignored the imagination, intellect, and emotions. Symbolists aimed to rectify this by producing pictures that evoke certain moods and feelings. Although Art Nouveau shared with symbolism the element of fantasy, it was primarily preoccupied with decorative effect. It can be seen as a response to William Morris's arts and crafts movement, but was also influenced by other styles such as Japanese prints and the revival of interest in ancient Celtic patterns. It was the first style to be promoted by mass communications. Style and subject symbolists aspired to communicate through line, color, and form, like music or poetry. They did not use readily defined symbols, but opted instead for images that were richly evocative. Symbolism was both a literary and artistic trend, with a manifesto written by the poet Jean Moréas in 1886. Art Nouveau was a concerted attempt to create an international, modern style based on decoration. It is characterized by highly stylized, flowing lines, and organic, plant-inspired motifs. Oiwa Katsushika Hokusai, 1830. The sinuous, curved lines of Art Nouveau were strongly influenced by Japanese prints such as Oiwa, from a famous Yotsuya Kaiden tale. Poisoned by her husband, she returns to haunt him in the guise of a lantern-headed ghost. Symbolism and Art Nouveau. Timeline. Symbolist trends evolved gradually. Gustave Moreau's lyrical variation of the Orpheus myth predates the formation of the Impressionists, while a romantic influence can be seen in the work of Arnold Bocklin and Pierre de Chavannes. Certainly, symbolism was in full swing by 1886, when Jean Moréas produced the movement's Manifesto, and the first hints of Art Nouveau emerged a few years later, in around 1890. 1865, Moreau, Orpheus. 1880, Bocklin, The Isle of the Dead. 1881, Puvis de Chavannes, The Poor Fisherman. 1886, What's Hope? 1890, Redon, The Closed Eyes. The Shell Odilon Redon's most overtly symbolist work was produced in monochrome, but in the 1890s he began using pastels, revealing his skill as a dazzling colorist. 1912, Pastel on Paper, 52x57.8 cm, Musée d'Orsay, Paris, France. Movements. The closing decades of the 19th century, and the period leading up to the First World War, were a time of unprecedented prosperity and modernity, often described as the New Industrial Revolution. From them sprung two new art movements. Symbolism. The Symbolist movement developed in France, but found followers in most of Europe. Its roots were in the aesthetic movement, which placed more importance on evoking a mood with subtle color harmonies than telling a story. The tag of the aesthetic movement was art for art's sake. The work of James Whistler was typical, demanding a response to its formal beauty rather than its subject matter. Symbolism reached its peak during the 1880s, when certain types of imagery became internationally common. These included the pale, sexually ambiguous figures popularized by Gustave Moreau and Sir Edward Burne-Jones, menacing femmes fatales who ensnared their victims with their impossibly long tresses, and the severed head. Art Nouveau. Art Nouveau took its name from a shop in Paris, but was known differently in other parts of Europe. In Italy it was the style Liberty, after the London department store, while in Germany it was called Jurgenastel, after a fashionable journal, Die Jugend. Given its emphasis on decoration, it is not surprising that Art Nouveau made its strongest impact on the applied arts. Its finest creations include the glassware of Louis Comfort Tiffany and René Lalique, Hector Guimard's ironwork entrances to the Paris Metro, Mucha's posters, and the designs of Charles Rennie Mackintosh. Salome with her mother, Herodias Aubrey Beardsley, one of 16 illustrations Beardsley produced for Oscar Wilde's play, Salome. Its sinuous lines are typically Art Nouveau. 1894, lithograph, private collection. Current events. 1875, Moréas and Co. is established in Britain, promoting the arts and crafts movement. 1895, art dealer Siegfried Bing opens his new Parisian store called Art Nouveau. 1895, first staging in London of the play The Importance of Being Earnest, written by the leading literary figure and wit of the aesthetic movement, Oscar Wilde. Gustave Moreau. B. Paris, 1826, D. Paris, 1898. Moreau was one of the founding fathers of symbolism. He was influenced by the coloristic approach of Theodore Chassereau and Eugene Delacroix, as well as the Renaissance masters Mantegna and Leonardo. He made his mark in the 1860s with a series of lyrical fantasies loosely based on Greek mythology. It was his paintings of Salome, shown at the Salon in 1876, that had the greatest impact. They featured in Huysmans's Nouvelle Rebours, Against Nature, a key symbolist text, and inspired a new generation of artists. He became a professor at the École des Beaux-Arts in 1892. The apparition Salome is confronted by a vision of John the Baptist, the man whose head she asked for. Her exotic robes, the crouching panther, and the dark, pagan temple create an air of suffocating decadence. Cent 1876, oil on canvas, 56 by 47 centimeters, Fogg Art Museum, Cambridge, U.S. Orpheus. This melancholy vision was a hit at the Salon in 1866. Orpheus was an exquisite musician who was torn limb from limb after he shunned the advances of Thracian maidens following the death of this wife, Eurydice. Here, a maiden carries his head away on his lyre. 1865, oil on canvas, 154 by 100 centimeters, Musée d'Orsay, Paris, France. In context. Salambo. Gustave Flaubert's Salam 6, 1862, was one of Moreau's favorite books. His paintings of Salome were closely based on the author's descriptions of the Carthaginian priestess. Portrait of Gustave Flaubert, 1821-80, by Eugene Giroux. One of France's greatest novelists, Flaubert is best remembered for his study of adultery in Madame Bovary, 1857. Pierre Puvis de Chavannes. B. Lyons, 1824, B. Paris, 1898. The son of an engineer, Puvis trained under French painter Henri Scheffer and also studied briefly with Delacroix and Couture. He made his mark painting murals or, more precisely, large canvases affixed to walls. The finest of these is the cycle of paintings often received a hostile reception at the Salon, but for the younger generation of artists, who were in tune with recent developments, they were highly influential. The Poor Fisherman, for example, was greatly admired by Gauguin, Seurat, and Picasso. The Poor Fisherman's slashy bleak, colorless terrain echoes the quiet desperation of a widower as he struggles to support his 2 children. 1881, oil on canvas, 156 x 193 centimeters, Musée d'Orsay, Paris, France. The beheading of Saint John the Baptist. Unlike other symbolist painters, Puvis focused on John's martyrdom rather than on Salome. She waits in the wings, holding the platter for his head. 1869, oil on canvas, 125 by 166 centimeters, Barber Institute of Fine Arts, Birmingham, UK. Closer look. An Eau Femme Fatale. By symbolist standards, this pensive Salome seems very demure. The model is said to be Princess Marie Cantacuzene, who became Puvis's wife in 1897. Odilon. Redon. B. Bordeaux, 1840, D. Paris, 1916. Although Redon was briefly a student of Jean-Léon Gérôme, his chief influences were the botanist Armand Clavad and the engraver Rodolphe Breston. The former interested him in microscopy, which inspired many of the germ-like creatures in his works. With the latter's guidance, Redon became a master of lithography and charcoal, his favorite media until the 1890s. His images are simple but mysterious. "Place a little door there," he wrote, "opening onto the unknown." The spider Phaeton's images can be humorous as well as disconcerting. The spider has human teeth and nostrils, but a charming smile. 1887, lithograph, 30 x 22 centimeters, Haag's Gemeente Museum, The Hague, Netherlands. Closed eyes, a giant head towers enigmatically over a moonlit shore. The eyes may be closed in meditation, sleep, or death. The painting is believed to have been inspired by Michelangelo's Dying Slave in the Louvre, but the model is Redon's wife. 1890, oil on canvas, 44 by 36 centimeters, Musée d'Orsay, Paris, France. Alphonse Mucha. Bienvenue, Moravia, 1860, D. Prague, 1939. One of the creators of the Art Nouveau style, Alphonse Mucha worked initially as a decorative painter in the theater, before completing his artistic education in Munich and Paris. After settling in Paris, he was employed as an illustrator, until he produced his first poster for the actress Sarah Bernhardt in 1894. This proved such a hit that he was flooded with other poster commissions. Mucha swiftly developed a winning formula for these. He adapted symbolist subjects, removing their mysterious and sinister qualities, and introducing in their place a mood of flirtatious gaiety. Instead of femmes fatales, he portrayed cheerful chorus girls with cascading hair and floating draperies. Although he is best known for his posters, Mucha also produced designs for jewelry, calendars, and stained glass windows. He was a fervent patriot, too, designing new banknotes and postage stamps after Czechoslovakia gained its independence, as well as a huge series of pictures on Slavic history. Lifeline. 1860, born in Moravia, then part of the Austrian Empire. 1887, moves to Paris, to study at the Académie Julian. 1894, his first poster for Sarah Bernhardt is a huge success. 1903, first trip to the US. 1906, marries Marie Kitilova in Prague. 1918, Czechoslovakia gains independence. 1928, completes Slav epic. A monumental series of pictures of Slavic history. 1939, is arrested by the Gestapo. Dies from a lung infection later that year. The arts. Dance. In the 1890s, when posters were still a novelty, there was a craze for collecting themed sets. Mucha produced several series, including The Arts, The Seasons, and Wild Flowers. 1898, color lithograph, 60 by 38 centimeters, Mucha Trust, Prague, Czech Republic. Closer look. Long hair, a feature of fin de siècle art. Long hair was associated by the symbolists with the femme fatale, and snaring her victims. But in Art Nouveau it became a decorative accessory, aiding the rhythm and flow of the composition. Sarah Bernhardt as Medea as well as posters for her performances. Mucha designed costumes and jewelry for this celebrated actress. 1898, color lithograph, 207 x 77 cm, Mucha Trust, Prague, Czech Republic. A. Bocklin. B. Ball, 1827, D. San Domenico, 1901. Born in Switzerland, Arnold Bocklin trained with Friedrich Wilhelm Schirmer in Dusseldorf and concentrated initially on landscape painting. In 1850, his first visit to Italy proved a revelation, awakening a love of Renaissance art. Bocklin soon returned for a longer stay, from 1852 to 1857, and made significant alterations to his artistic style. Increasingly, he turned to mythological subjects, avoiding specific legends and focusing instead on imaginary scenes of nymphs, satyrs, centaurs, and mermaids. As he became aware of symbolist developments, Bocklin's art assumed a darker tone. His masterpiece in this vein was The Island of the Dead. The original was commissioned by a woman whose husband had just died, but the funereal theme haunted the artist, and he produced no fewer than 5 versions of it, 1880 to 86. One of these was later owned by Adolf Hitler, and the image was also adapted for the set of one of Boris Karloff's horror films. Lifeline. 1827, born in Ball. 1845 to 47, trains at the Academy in Dusseldorf. 1850, makes the first of many visits to Italy. 1860, takes up a teaching post in Weimar. 1880, paints first version of The Island of the Dead. 1894, buys the Villa Bellagio in San Domenico, Italy, where he dies in 1901. The Island of the Dead. Bocklin called this haunting painting a picture for dreaming over. 1880, oil on panel, 80 x 154 centimeters, Museum der Bildenden Kunst, Leipzig, Germany. Transporting the dead. The eerie, hooded figure standing in the boat carries echoes of Charon, the ferryman of the dead in Greek mythology. The title of the painting was provided by a Berlin art dealer in 1883. See Bocklin's mermaid pictures were often quaint or sentimental, but this one has an air of menace. She is a femme fatale, casting her spell on hapless mariners. 1886–87, oil on panel, 103 x 150 cm, Kunstmuseum, Bern, Switzerland.